Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. I wanted to, last week I did a live for the first time in quite a while. And so I decided I was going to do another episode of my podcast live so that you can come on and ask questions and, um, and make statements and join the conversation. I don't have a guest today, but I'm going to share on something that came up. So first of all, I just want to remind you, Relationship Matters podcast, empowering conversations, I started so that we could have empowering conversations about having healthy relationships. And this is season 2 and episode 10. And I'm just really excited. I've had great response from this podcast. I hope you have enjoyed it. And if you haven't, and this is the first time seeing me or jumping on, or finding this podcast, please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're on YouTube, or I'm also on Spotify and, of course, Apple Podcasts. And you can subscribe to either one of those as well. And it would be great to have you as a subscriber, because relationships, something that every single person has. And that's why I got into this. A few years ago, I just saw the value of relationships, but I also saw the pain in relationships. And now more than ever, relationships are under fire. It's been so difficult. And I'm doing this episode today. I'm calling it The Power of Forgiveness. I'm going to talk about forgiveness. I hope you can join the discussion by asking questions or making statements in your comments. They come right into my studio here. So if no matter what platform you're on, whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on LinkedIn, whether you're on YouTube, you can ask a question or make a comment, and it'll actually come right into my thing here. And so I want to be able to do that. And just got a tech thing here. I think we're good now. Okay, so I want to talk about forgiveness today. Now, how this came up is I have a coaching client who is 9 years old, and I can't say his name, but he is an amazing young man. He has a heart of gold and a heart for God. And I was visiting with him this week, and I can't tell you the whole story, but his dad left, and he's just really struggling with that fact. And he talked to me this week, and as we were sharing, he said, "Why don't you do a podcast on forgiveness?" He said, "I think that would help a lot of people." And so my friend, I can't say your name, but you know who you are. I'm doing this podcast because it was requested. And so I know that not only will it help my 9-year-old friend, it's also going to help anybody else that listens to this. So in a very real way, you're helping other people. And so, what I want to talk about today is the idea of forgiveness. I think one of the problems with forgiveness in a lot of people's minds is that they don't understand it. I think it's been presented in different ways at different times for different people in ways. And so I want to kind of do some myth busting on forgiveness, but I also want to give you some real practical steps on how to walk out forgiveness when you're in a possible conflict, a possible heartbreak and whatnot. And thanks, Sue. I'm glad you're watching. She asked here, this is what I can do. See, I can put my comments. So Stu asked, could you please speak to when you ask your partner to do something, but they don't do it? I forgive, but I don't trust. That is such a great comment and a great question, Sue. And I'm going to answer that for sure, because here you actually bring up a very good point off the bat. I often say forgiveness is a gift, trust is earned. So because you forgive somebody, it does not mean that trust is automatic. And I think this is one of the myths that I like to bust. I was actually talking in a cohort the other day in a group of people, and that question came up. They actually mentioned that they were raised believing that if they wanted to be a good person, they needed to forgive and forget. They needed to forgive and just kind of let the bad things happen. Just let it roll off your back. That is not true. Forgiveness is not saying that it was okay It was not saying that what happened to you or the hurt that happened was okay. That is not what forgiveness is. What forgiveness is when you choose forgiveness, it's actually a decision. It's not an emotion. So I want to jump into this subject today. And if you're asking your partner or asking anybody, as Sue asked there, if you ask them to do something and they continually not do it and you continually forgive, some people ask, how many times should I forgive? Well, the Bible says to forgive 70 times 7. If you do the equation there, it's basically forever. But the point is, forgiveness does not mean trust is earned back. And I think trust needs to be earned. And so we're going to talk about all those kinds of things today here. And so I want to just, I'm going to put up a quote here. And I just want to read this to you. It says, unforgiveness is the title of it. Being in unforgiveness is like being on a giant hook. Next to you on the hook is the person who has hurt you. The hook is extremely painful. Wherever you go, so does the hook, and so does the offender. The only way you can get off the hook is to allow the offender off first. The cost of not allowing the offender off the hook is perhaps a lifetime of unhappiness. Now, I want to qualify a couple things. Letting someone off the hook is not saying that it was okay, it happened. But when you let somebody off the hook, it means the forgiveness breaks the soul tie. It breaks the offense, if you will. You don't have to carry that offense around with you. And in fact, I often tell people, if you think about it, when you hold bitterness towards somebody, you hold unforgiveness towards somebody, what happens is you're literally allowing them to control your life. You're giving them your power, even if you don't ever see them again. Because they're living rent-free in your mind, they're living rent-free in your heart because of that unforgiveness. And so it's so important to make sure that you are walking in forgiveness, that you are forgiving. This is another thing. Forgiveness is not only for the other person, forgiveness is for you. So when you're forgiving somebody, it's letting yourself off the hook as well. It's letting the offense, you can acknowledge the offense. You can say, this was hurtful, this was painful. But what you're doing is you're saying, and it was not okay. However, I choose to forgive. It's an act of grace. It's an act of gift. I choose to forgive, to allow them and myself off the hook so that I don't have to carry that offense around with me any longer. And so that does not mean reconciliation. Not every time we forgive do we have to reconcile, and especially if it's not safe to do so. If you're still at emotional risk, or by the way, a caveat, if there's ever physical abuse or other abuses, then absolutely not. You have to protect yourself. You have to care for yourself and get to safety. And it does not mean because you forgive somebody for hurting you that you have to reconcile if it's not safe to do so. Now, if you can, if it's appropriate to, then of course, reconciliation is part of our growth. It's part of our process, but it doesn't have to come in the moment you forgive. The other little thing that I tell people is that forgiveness does not mean that you're going to feel the emotions of forgiveness. It's not an emotion yet. It's a choice. You choose to forgive, and when you forgive, the emotions of your choice will catch up to you. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, every moment, but it means that, I put it this way, when you forgive, you're giving someone an opportunity to earn your trust back. And so they need to earn that trust back. But if it's not safe to do so, it's also okay to forgive and release, forgive and let go of that relationship. Now, for many years, I had a relationship that in my family that was at odds, and it was very painful for everybody, but it was at odds. But what I chose to do is I kept this little gift of forgiveness, like a bow. I kept it up on the shelf and I had it ready. I dealt with it in my heart. Quite often, a friend of mine, Lavon Earl, who's just a fantastic coach, she says this. She says, you can forgive and reconcile in the spirit, in your heart, but not necessarily in the natural, in the now. And so my example here is I chose to forgive the person that we had offense with. I chose to forgive them. I put the gift of forgiveness on the shelf. They were not ready to reconcile, and I wasn't. I was not sure I was, but I wanted to forgive. So I walked in forgiveness. And so there was still times that my heart was hurt. There's still times I felt the pain of separation and not being able to communicate and whatnot, but I still chose the forgiveness gift until the day they were ready, and I knew I was ready. But if I hadn't had that forgiveness in my heart, it wasn't an emotion, it was a choice. I would not have been ready when they were ready to reconcile. And gladly to tell you, we did reconcile, and we have a great relationship today. And so that is just part of the process. When you forgive, the emotions don't necessarily agree with your choice. Sometimes the pain's still there, but that's okay. We're human. Forget this idea that you have to be perfect, or that you're only being gracious if you let people step all over you. I always say meekness is not weakness. Meekness is having the power, having the strength, but controlling it, being able to measure it. And so what happens is I can choose forgiveness because that's who I am, not because of anything they deserve or have done, but because of who I am. I choose forgiveness, and that releases me from the obligation of it. I'm going to throw another slide up here to help see this. Add to stream. I'm just going to put this. I want to give you five reasons for forgiveness will heal the shame in your life. It'll heal those things in your life. First of all, forgiveness allows you to own your emotions. So it allows you to own your emotions. Like I said, when you're in unforgiveness, I want you to see me on this one. When you're in unforgiveness, you don't own your emotions. You've given your power over to the other person. And so when you forgive, you're reclaiming your emotions. You're telling your emotions what they need to feel, not them telling you how you feel. That's very empowering. It's very powerful. Number two, forgiveness allows us to learn and grow. Sometimes we learn and grow through that hurt, through that pain. And when we forgive, we learn about grace. We learn about that, you know what? We need to be forgiven sometimes. You know what? We've offended people. I've made mistakes where I've had to go ask forgiveness, where I've had to admit where I've hurt people. And so if I'm going to receive forgiveness, I surely need to share forgiveness. Now, as all you listeners know, I'm a person of faith. I believe in God. And so for me, the ultimate forgiveness was him forgiving me. And it empowered me. It gave me the ability to forgive others and to forgive myself, by the way. I had much in my life that I had to forgive about myself. And by the way, a lot of my anger, a lot of my hurt that I caused to people came out of that cause and effect of me having hurt in my life. So when I forgave, it allowed me to learn and grow. It allowed me to actually learn how to forgive when I was forgiven. And it gave me the power to do that and not expect a result back. Number three, forgiveness allows us to stop being the victim. Quite often when you've heard the term victimized, when we've been hurt and victimized, we stay in that victimhood. We stay living there. That we start to believe the narrative. I talked last week a little bit about self-esteem and self-image and self-dignity. We start to see ourselves in the wrong light because of the way we were treated by others. And so what happens is when we're in unforgiveness, it keeps us locked into that belief system. But when I forgive, it empowers me to actually really believe that I can do better, that I can grow and I can learn. And so it was very empowering for me. It released me from being the victim, and it allowed me to see myself as a victor. I'm going to say that again. When you forgive, it takes you from feeling like a victim to feeling like a victor. And that is really important. Number four, forgiveness allows people to do the best they can with what they have. I really believe that's the definition of success, doing the best you can with what you have. And so I really believe that forgiveness allows us to do the best we can. Listen, there's always cause and effect. That person who hurt you probably has hurt in their life. There probably is something that's happened in their childhood that maybe set them in a direction that it was difficult to relate to you and relate to people. So, you know, when we forgive, we realize people are doing the best they can with what they have. Again, if there's abuse, that's different. You are safe first. You never put yourself at risk. Number 5, forgiveness allows us an opportunity for humility. It takes great humility to actually forgive, and because we want our rights met. We want people to know, hey, I have the right to this, or I have the right to that, and we claim our rights, but sometimes we have a hard time taking responsibility. 2 greatest growth times in my life. One was when I started taking responsibility for my behaviors. In other words, asking for forgiveness. And the second one was when I stopped taking responsibility for other people giving forgiveness. I don't have to take responsibility for someone else's behavior. My role is to be who I am, which is a forgiving person. And so I chose to be in forgiveness. Isn't that a wonderful promise? So listen, I want to remind you, there's questions. You can put comments in here. You can ask questions. You can join the conversation in whatever platform you're watching on. And I'd love to hear from you. And so, yes. So now, what about rebuilding trust? What about that rebuilding trust thing? Back to Sue's question. Well, I really believe that building trust is very important because we are responsible to do that. Now, in my book, Relationship Matters, which you can order at markgordon.ca, should I put a banner up? markgordon.ca. Go to my website. You can buy my book. You can get an ebook right away, or you can order it on Amazon and they'll send it to you when they get in stock. And so I just want to, in my book, I talk about trust being the foundational or cornerstone pillar in a relationship. And so it's really important to rebuild that trust. And so that's what I would work on with my partner. I would say, listen, I've forgiven you. I love you. I'd use I language, but I feel wounded when promises are broken. And there's the 3 I languages, right? And so when I feel wounded, I become angry, or I become hurt, or I become defensive, whatever it is for you. And so I want us to be able to trust each other, and I want you to start following through on your promises. That is a way you can communicate that to a partner. Now, for the partner who is not following through, their responsibility is to follow through and start with the small things. And I usually tell people, listen, if you're on the side of needing forgiveness and needing to rebuild trust, what I tell people is start with the little things and start with what hasn't been solved yet. Can I just say it that way? Like, for example, if I have promised to take my wife on a date and I have not followed through with that, the first thing I should do to rebuild trust is to take her on a date. So, or if I promise to take the garbage out and I forget to do it, I need to then go and do that first and then talk to her and say, please forgive me. I've done it now. I let that go and I shouldn't have. So that's kind of where there's responsibility on both sides of the coin. My responsibility is to take responsibility for what I did and do it, what I promised and do it. And the other person's responsibility is to then forgive me and reconcile and be okay with that thing. Now that's a kind of a light example, but you get what I'm saying. So let me give you 6 steps, forgiveness in 6 steps. And so this will maybe help you go through. I try to simplify things. And listen, interrupt me with questions, interrupt me. Just put them in the chat. They come right through the studio and I'll answer your questions. All right. So forgiveness in 6 steps. Number 1, know exactly how you feel about what happened. It's okay to feel the pain, to acknowledge the pain. What you don't want to do is live in the pain. So you want to acknowledge it, but then what you do is you if you're a person of faith, you can bring it to God. Even if you're not a person of faith, you can bring it to God and say, God, this is so hurtful, it's so painful. I just bring it to you. And then be able to articulate what about the situation was not okay. It's okay to acknowledge, listen, I felt mistreated. I felt misunderstood. It's okay to articulate what it is you're forgiving, it actually helps you, because what you're doing is you're telling your heart and your brain kind of what you were feeling at the time so that you can reconcile that feeling. Does that make sense? So you want to forgiveness is a verb. It's an action. It's activity. And so know exactly, go through it. So why did that hurt me? Ask the question of yourself. Why am I so offended by this? Why am I so hurt by this? So that you can gain understanding of your own heart and why you're feeling what you're feeling. And then what is not okay about it? You know what? It's not okay when I'm yelled at. It's not okay when I'm mistreated or when a promise is broken. And so that's the first step. The second step is to simply make a commitment to yourself that forgiveness is for you and not necessarily anyone else. Now, it is for you're forgiving somebody, but what I mean by that is forgiveness is for you first. You are forgiving to clear your heart off, to clear the decks for you so that you can forgive that person and not be carrying unforgiveness or bitterness in your heart. One description of bitterness is to drink poison expecting the other person to die. Right. And so what we often do is we self-punish. We withhold from the other person, or we cut them out of our lives, but then we lose the benefits of having them in our lives, or we don't trust the other person in our life. And so then we actually lose the benefits of other people in our lives because we hold everybody back because we can't trust anybody because I haven't forgiven. So you want to make a commitment that forgiveness is to release yourself from the hook. It's to get yourself, but you got to let the other person off first to let yourself off. That's why forgiveness is that step. Okay. So let's go to number 3. Number 3 is understand what forgiveness does not, understand that forgiveness does not necessarily mean reconciliation with the person who hurt you or condones their actions. So I talked about that a little bit before, but listen, it doesn't mean that that you're condoning what happened to you because you forgive somebody, and it doesn't mean that it's that it's necessarily that the other person is going to even reciprocate. They may not even acknowledge that forgiveness is needed, but and so it doesn't mean that you have to reconcile. As I said earlier, it means that what you want to do is just acknowledge that this is that this forgiveness is a choice that I'm making because of who I am. And it doesn't mean that I may not be ready to reconcile. I might need a little more time living in the forgiveness and feeling it and letting the emotions catch up before I'm ready to communicate about it. Now, remember, last week I talked about how conflict is misunderstood. We see conflict as a bad thing, but actually conflict's a good thing. It helps us go deeper. Conflict will help you share what was not okay about what happened to you. It's actually okay to go to that person and even tell them that you're forgiving them and what you're forgiving them for, and why it hurt you. But you're doing that for you. You may not get an answer. I did that once. I had a leader in my life who hurt me, and I harbored feelings towards them. I at first did not forgive, and I would speak poorly of them, and I would gossip about them and tell anybody that would listen how terrible of a person they were. I know it's hard to believe, right? Me. But yes, I even have problems. So I ended up, but then I got convicted. I felt like God spoke to me about it and said, you need to forgive. And so I chose to forgive the person. But I also realized when I did forgive them, I forgave them without reconciliation yet. I forgave them, and I realized, I need to probably go and ask their forgiveness because I've spoke poorly of them. So in some way, I've offended them as well. And so I made the decision that I was going to go talk to them, and I did. I went and I had a meeting set up. I talked to them, and I asked their forgiveness for speaking poorly of them, and I wanted them to know that I forgave them. Their response was absolutely horrible. It's about time. I was wondering when you'd wake up, and he was very critical. But I wasn't there for him. I was there for me. And I forgave him. And even after he responded poorly, I knew in that moment I would never reconcile with this person. That I didn't have to reconcile with him. That wasn't my responsibility. My responsibility was to take responsibility for what I did. And I did that. And I walked out of that office feeling free and feeling clear. My heart was clear, and I've never seen that person again. I don't harbor any feelings towards them. I have no unforgiveness in my heart, fully forgiven. If I saw them on the street tomorrow, I would be able to say hi and be cordial and be nice, but I am not going to go enter a relationship with somebody that would treat me that way. So it's empowered me. Forgiveness empowered me to be able to put boundaries up to protect my heart. So that is really important to understand. So let's keep going. Number 4. All right, number 4 here. Oops, sorry, I went to the wrong slide. Here's number 4. All right, get the right perspective on how the offense is affecting you. So I had to get the right understanding of how it was affecting me. I realized it was affecting my leadership because I held something against his leadership. And so I had to realize, for me to forgive, I had to get the right perspective on how the offense is affecting me. And what I realized was, thanks, Patty. That's awesome. Thanks for saying that. I love having you on here. Yay. And so it is true that I had to have that perspective to get the right perspective on how it was affecting me. Because what we do is we justify, right? We'll push it off or say, well, it doesn't affect me. I never have to see him again. I don't care. How many times have you said, I don't care, when you really do care? let's come on, let's admit it. I've done it. But what you want to do is you want to get the right perspectives when you're forgiving. Number 5, what you want to do is either talk directly to or write a letter to the person who hurt you, expressing how it hurt you and that you forgive them. It's really important to be able to do that. It empowers you. Now, why did I say talk directly to or write a letter? Well, in some cases, it's not safe to go and talk to them, or maybe you're not ready for that reconciliation. So what you want to do is you want to write it out, write a letter to that person. Maybe you just don't feel quite the courage yet. It's okay to write the letter out and say everything in it, that how they hurt you, how it has affected you. You could do all steps 1 to 5 right there, and just put it all in there. This is how it affected me, but I'm choosing to forgive you, and this is what I'm forgiving you for. Now, you can put in there, if it's a letter, hey, you don't have to respond. I'm not asking for a response. I'm just letting you know how it is. So you can either talk directly to a person if it's safe, or you can write a letter if it's not, or if they've passed on. If you don't have the ability to forgive, and you might be asking me, nobody put that question in here, but what do you do if a loved one has passed away and you let them pass away and you still have that offense, that hurt in your heart? Listen, you can write the letter to them. I've done this with clients. You can write the letter to them and then rip it up or burn it or do anything as representation that you've dealt with it. But it's important to express it. It's important for you. Maybe you can get somebody like myself as a proxy and just tell me. I've done that with clients many times, or people many times, where I've stood in proxy and said, listen, I represent your dad, or I represent your ex-husband, or I represent whoever it is. I represent that person who hurt you. Tell me what you need to tell me. And they will just pour their hearts out, how much they're, and I will stand in proxy and say, I receive your forgiveness, and I ask you for forgiveness, and whatever. It's been very, very powerful moments. If you are struggling with this, please, please, please find somebody that maybe you could even practice with. Just say it out loud. I choose to forgive. I choose to forgive. And when you do that, listen, you're not going to have the emotions catch up right away, but there is a freedom that comes that is so powerful. That is truly the power of forgiveness. You will have a freedom come. You will be able to re-engage with your own emotions. You'll be able to re-engage in your own life. You'll start to be able to see yourself in the right light again because you've forgiven. Number 6, final step. Do not expect the other person to recognize the need to be forgiven. They may not reciprocate. This is so important. In the 6th step, just realize you're not looking for them to, by asking forgiveness, in other words, don't do it to manipulate them to take responsibility. Some people may never take responsibility for what they've done. it's part of their problem. It's one of the reasons they were able to hurt you and cause pain in your life, is because they have a hard time taking responsibility, or they simply don't see it. And so when you do this, excuse me, when you do this, make sure that your expectations are that you're doing this for yourself. And if it does spark a response, and they do, maybe the timing is right and they do take responsibility, well, listen, you've got reconciliation then. You can actually, reestablish your relationship. But I'm going to give you a bonus step. Number 7. You've asked forgiveness. You've made it clear why. We've gone through all the steps. You've made it clear why. You have articulated what hurt you, how it hurt you, why it hurt you. You've articulated that you're forgiving them. And let's say they respond, I'm so sorry. I take responsibility. I had no idea I hurt you that way. I am so sorry. And you hug it out. There's one more step. Make sure to communicate boundaries after you've forgiven that person. This will help Sue, you're answering your question. What you do is you put boundaries in. You put a boundary in that has a cause and effect attached to it. So they have to earn trust back. So you'll say, thank you so much for receiving my forgiveness. Thank you so much for asking forgiveness, whatever, I want to protect our relationship moving forward. And boundaries protect relationships. They don't hurt relationships. And so I want to put just a couple of simple boundaries in place for us so that we don't go through this again. And then you just, maybe there's 3 points that you want to make sure that this does not happen again. So you can put those boundaries in place and make clear what's going to happen if the boundaries are not followed. In other words, I am going to continue to walk in forgiveness. However, I will not be able to spend time with you, or I will not be able to let you close to me if you don't respect my boundaries. I'm going to be I forgive you, I love you, but I need to protect my heart, and I need to do it with boundaries, not walls. And so that's a really empowering thing, is when you can do that, when you can put the boundary up after, so that the person knows what the expectation is. So often we expect other people just to know how we're feeling, or we know what it is that hurts us. You can't assume that. Assumption is the enemy of faith. If you want to have faith in somebody, you need to communicate to them exactly what you're feeling about that situation. And so I just wanted to say that part of it. I have one last slide here I thought was just so good, and that is this. Audrey Hepburn, I don't know if you know who that is. That's an actress from many, many years ago. She said, nothing is impossible. The word itself says, I'm possible. I love that. What a great reminder. You can do this, in other words. You can forgive. I want to see you empowered today. I want to see your relationships restored and empowered. And I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, which is actually good news. And that is, you're not going to be able to have healthy relationships without a lifestyle of forgiveness. Sorry, but not sorry. You can't have a healthy relationship without forgiveness and without boundaries. It's just not going to happen. You have to walk in forgiveness. And so I want to encourage you today to choose a lifestyle of forgiveness. Now I'm winding down here. If you have questions or comments, now's the time to get them in there before I cut us off, before I stop the live here. But I want you to understand that forgiveness is it's funny. People ask me sometimes, why isn't forgiveness a pillar in a healthy relationship? Well, I believe if you live out the pillars of the healthy relationship, pillar number 1 is trust. Pillar number 2 is good communication. Pillar number 3 is authenticity. Pillar number 4 is honesty. Pillar number 5 is honor. If you're actually active in all of those pillars, or active in your relationships, you won't need to forgive. But if you needed to, it would be easy, because you have a healthy pillars in your healthy foundation in your relationship. It makes it much easier to. So that's why I didn't put forgiveness as a pillar, but it is a value. It is absolutely a need. It's absolutely a requirement for healthy relationships. Listen, we have three primary relationships, one with God, so we need to receive his forgiveness, one with ourselves, so we need to forgive ourselves. And number three is with others, so we have to forgive others. It's just the way it works, folks. It's just the way it works. If I can't receive forgiveness, it makes it very difficult to forgive myself. And if I can't forgive myself, it makes it very difficult to forgive others. And so I just want to remind you of that forgiveness doesn't say that it was okay what happened. In fact, it says it wasn't okay, but I'm choosing forgiveness because that's who I am. I love that thought. It's because of who you are, because you are kind, because you are gracious, because you are loving, because you're lovable, because you deserve the freedom. An abundant life is what's promised for you. And forgiveness is part of that abundant life. We don't enter into the abundant life without forgiveness, receiving God's forgiveness, forgiving ourselves, and forgiving others. That is your steps. That's your key to absolutely a healthy and abundant life. The flourishing life that you deserve is right there on the other side of forgiveness. Now, again, you may not feel it emotionally right away, but let me tell you, your choice will win in the end. But you got to choose it every day. You got to choose it every moment, and people will test it, especially those that you've forgiven and reconciled with, the ones that are closest to you. They will test it. They'll test it. Your partners, your spouses, they'll test it. But how rich is it that you can actually go through that conflict, forgive one another, discover things about each other you didn't know, and now the relationship's even deeper. It's a beautiful picture. So that's my little podcast today. That's my little encouragement for you this week. I have a guest next week, and so I'm going to be talking to Bob Carroll. He's just written a book and released a book about father's love, and boy, is it powerful. And so I'm really excited to have him on next week. But this week, I'll sign off for now. But remember, relationship matters, and forgiveness is a key to healthy relationships. And so thanks for joining me. I really encourage you to go to my website, markgordon.ca. I have a subscription model now that you can go to and sign up for, and you get content all the time like this. And so if you go to subkit.com/Mark Gordon, you can see the subscription there. It's a monthly subscription, and then you get weekly letters, you get encouragement, you get videos, you get access to my other trainings and whatnot. And so I invite you to do that and to get into the Relationship Matters ecosystem. And I hope you're encouraged today. Thanks so much for joining me, and we will see you next time. Talk to you later.